Hello, dear believers of Jesus Christ. This is a testimony we received a few weeks back. Today I will be sharing it with you. I don't want you to see this testimony as ordinary. This is a vision that is meant to warn each and every one of us of a future danger that may occur soon before we even know it. So I want you to give me a few minutes of your time so I can share this powerful testimony with you. Before I begin sharing this testimony, I would love to know where you are listening from. That way, it will be easy for each of us to connect as one family. Also, if you have any prayer request, kindly leave it in the comments so that others will pray with you. God bless you. Now, I will begin sharing the testimony. I want to be honest with you before I say anything else. I almost did not write this down. I sat with it for weeks. I would open my notebook, put the pen to the page, and then close it again. Because every time I tried to start, I felt the weight of it all over again, and I did not know if I had the words. But I'm going to share it anyway. My name is Jeremiah Osman. I am 45 years old. I live alone in a modest house in a quiet part of town. I am not a pastor. I am not a theologian. I repair appliances for a living. Washing machines, refrigerators, dishwashers. I am the man you call when something stops working. That is who I am. That is the kind of man this happened to. I need you to hold that picture in your mind as I tell you this. Because I think sometimes people hear stories like this, and they assume the person telling it must be someone extraordinary. Someone who had already been living some elevated spiritual life. Someone who was halfway there already. I was not that man. I was a man who went to church occasionally, who believed in God the way most people believe in something they cannot fully see. Distantly. Respectfully. But not closely. Not the way I do now. Not even close to the way I do now. It was a Tuesday night in late winter. Nothing about the day had been unusual. I had fixed a washing machine in the morning, eaten a sandwich for lunch, watched television for a few hours after dinner. Around 11 o'clock, I turned everything off and went to bed. I did not make it to the bed. I was walking down the hallway, just the hallway of my own house, that I had walked down 10,000 times, and something happened to my body. I did not feel pain exactly. It was more like the floor came up to meet me very quickly, and I did not have time to stop it. I went down hard, and I remember the side of my face against the cold floor and thinking, that is strange, I should get up. And then the thinking stopped. What happened next is the thing I have been trying to find language for ever since. I was standing up. That was the first thing. I was standing, and I was in the hallway, and everything looked exactly as it always looked. The same walls, the same light from the bathroom I had left on, the same coat hanging by the door. All of it exactly the same, except I was also on the floor. I could see myself on the floor, face turned to the side, one arm underneath me, completely still. I want to tell you that I panicked. That would make sense. That would be the reasonable human response to looking down at your own body, lying on the ground while you are standing 2 feet away from it. But panic did not come. I felt it try to rise up in me, felt it reach for me the way fear reaches, and then something stopped it. Not pushed it away, stopped it entirely, like a hand pressed gently but firmly against a door that was trying to open. And in the place where the fear had been, something else came in. Something so different from fear that I do not have a word that contains both of them. Peace is too small a word. Peace makes you think of quiet and calm, and those things were part of it. But this was bigger than quiet. This was the absence of every wrong thing, every worry I had carried for years, every regret, every low-grade anxiety that had lived in the back of my mind for so long I had stopped noticing it was there. All of it was simply gone. Not managed, not suppressed, gone, like it had never existed at all. And then I felt that I was not alone. I turned around. I do not know why I turned. Something told me to. The way you turn when you sense someone has entered a room behind you even before you hear them. And he was there. I am going to say this plainly because there is no other way to say it. Jesus was standing in my hallway. I have thought about how to describe this moment more times than I can count, and every time I come back to the same conclusion, which is that the description will always fall short. But I will try. He was not the way I had imagined him from paintings or pictures or anything I had grown up seeing. There was something familiar, yes, some quality that connected to everything I had ever been told or shown about who he was, but the reality of him standing there was something no image had ever prepared me for. Not because of how he looked, but because of what came from him. The presence of him filled the room the way light fills a room. Except it was not light exactly. It was authority. It was the feeling of standing near something that is the source of everything, the way you feel heat near a fire. But the fire is not burning anything. The fire is simply what it is, complete and certain, and requiring nothing from you to be exactly what it is. He looked at me, and in that look, I felt seen in a way I had never been seen by any human person in my entire life. Not evaluated, not judged. Seen. Every part of me known completely and held without flinching. Every good thing and every failure and every prayer I had ever half meant and every moment I had given up on myself and every quiet hope I had carried, without admitting it to anyone, including myself, all of it seen. All of it held, and none of it changing the expression on his face, which was not what I expected either. I had expected, if I am honest, something solemn, something formal, something that matched the weight of the moment. What I saw was love, just love, simple and complete and directed entirely at me, at Jeremiah Osman, the appliance repairman who had been living his ordinary life and had fallen down in his hallway on a Tuesday night. He said my name. Just my name, the way you say the name of someone you have known their whole life. And I cannot explain to you what happened in my chest when he said it. I can only tell you that I sat with it for days afterward. The memory of my own name said in that voice and cried every time. He told me to come with him. Not in words exactly. The communication was different from speech. It was more like understanding arrived fully formed, the way you understand something in a dream without anyone explaining it. And I went with him. The house disappeared. I want to be precise about that. It did not fade or blur the way things do in dreams. It simply was no longer where I was. One moment I was in my hallway, and the next I was somewhere else entirely. And the transition between those two things had no middle. I was not afraid. I keep coming back to that because I think it is important. I was not afraid at any point in this. Something in his presence made fear structurally impossible, the way darkness is structurally impossible when there is light. I was above the earth, far above it, far enough to see the whole of it at once. Every continent, the curve of the atmosphere, the slow movement of weather systems across oceans. But also, and this is the part that does not fit into normal logic, also close enough to see everything. Every street, every rooftop, every face. Both of those things were true simultaneously, and somehow I could hold both of them without confusion. The earth below me was turning slowly. It was beautiful in a way that caught in my throat even then, even in the middle of everything else. The colors of it. The way the light moved across it as it turned, but I noticed something else moving too. Something that was not weather, a heaviness, spreading from different points across the globe at the same time. Not darkness, not exactly, more like a pressure change. Like when you can feel a storm coming before any cloud has appeared, when the air itself announces that something is on its way. I watched it spread slowly at first, the way a drop of ink spreads in still water, finding its way outward in all directions. Then faster. Then everywhere. Jesus was beside me. I could feel him before I could see him clearly in that new place. And he began to show me things. The first thing he showed me was a normal day. That was what struck me about it immediately, how normal it was. I was watching a city on an ordinary morning. The traffic was heavy the way it always is before 9 o'clock. Coffee shops had lines out the door. Office buildings were filling up, floor by floor, elevator by elevator. Children with backpacks were getting on school buses. The whole enormous familiar machinery of a regular day was turning exactly as it always turned. I noticed a woman at a crosswalk checking her phone. A man in a car eating something wrapped in paper. Two teenagers walking together, one of them laughing at whatever the other had said, all of it completely, unremarkably ordinary, and then it was not. It did not begin with something traumatic. That was what surprised me. There was no explosion, no visible disaster, nothing that announced itself loudly. It started with a feeling moving through people. I watched it happen. I watched a crowd that had been moving in its normal rhythms slow down and then stop. Not all at once. One person, then the person near them, then the person near them. Like a wave moving through water, but the wave was awareness. Something had reached them all at the same time. Every phone and every screen and every hand and every window was carrying the same message. I did not hear the specific words, but I understood them completely. The instruction was universal, simultaneous. The same message from every authority in every country reaching every person at the same instant. Stay home. This is not optional. And the world cracked. Not violently. Not all at once. The way a crack moves through glass, starting from one point and traveling outward in every direction, faster than you can follow it with your eyes. The first minutes were almost silent. People stopping, processing, phones going to ears, and then the movement started. The lines at stores forming so fast that within an hour they were wrapping around buildings. The traffic reversing direction, everyone going home instead of toward. Cities that had been full of their usual sounds emptying of those sounds and filling with a different sound. The sound of fear that has not yet decided what form it wants to take. Jesus showed me that this first day did something specific to people that went beyond the obvious disruption. He showed me that it removed something people had not realized they were depending on. The confidence that the systems would keep running. Government, commerce, communication, transportation, all of it technically still functioning but suddenly feeling fragile in a way it never had before. And in the space that opened up, where that confidence used to be, each person was left alone with what they actually believed. Not what they said they believed, what they genuinely, in the most honest part of themselves, actually believed. And for many people, that was the most frightening moment of the entire day. I watched an image that has stayed with me ever since. On an empty sidewalk in front of an office building, a briefcase sat unclaimed on the pavement. Whoever had been carrying it had set it down and walked away without picking it back up. And something about that image contained the whole meaning of the first day. Everything people had built their sense of themselves around. Everything that had organized their time and defined their purpose and told them who they were, sitting unclaimed on an empty pavement. Not because those things were bad, but because the day had come when they were no longer the thing that mattered. The second day began differently. The first day had run on adrenaline, on the sharp energy of shock. The second day was what came after the adrenaline left. The morning after, when you woke up hoping it had been a dream and checked, and it had not been a dream, and the full weight of it settled onto you without the cushion of shock to soften it. The streets were empty now in a way that felt permanent rather than temporary. The first day, the empty streets had been alarming. The second day, they were simply true. This was the world now. These were the streets now. Jesus told me that the second day was the day of refinement. That word has stayed with me. Refinement. The way metal is put into fire not to destroy it, but to burn away everything in it that does not belong to the metal. The second day was that fire. Inside homes across the world, I watched what the pressure of confinement did to relationships. I watched it in a large and well-furnished house where something was breaking between the people inside. Not the walls or the furniture, but something between them. It started in small things, a comment landing wrong at a breakfast table, a door closed with slightly more force than necessary, old grievances surfacing because the pressure had made the surface of everything too thin to hold what was underneath. And somewhere in that house, a child sat alone in a room with their knees pulled to their chest, listening to raised voices through the walls. And then, in a smaller and simpler house somewhere else, I watched something completely different. The father of the home got down on his knees in the main room, and one by one, the rest of his family came and knelt with him. And they prayed together the way people pray when they are genuinely talking to someone they genuinely believe is listening. Not performance, not habit, the real thing. And when they finished, the youngest child climbed into someone's lap and put their head down and went completely still. And the peace in that room was as visible as the fear in the other one. You could feel it from outside the window. Jesus showed me that the difference between those two households was not money or circumstances or education. The difference was what had been built before the days arrived. The habits of the heart formed in the ordinary time. The choices made when no crisis was forcing anyone to choose. The second day simply showed what was already there. Pressure does not create character, it reveals it. I also saw on the second day what was happening in the high rooms where decisions are made. I will not claim to understand the details of it, but I can tell you the atmosphere of it. It was not the atmosphere of people who were in control. It was the atmosphere of people who were very practiced at looking like they were in control, while everything inside them reached frantically for something solid to hold. The tools of human authority were being applied with full force, and those tools were not sufficient. Not because the people using them were evil, but because the tools of human power are simply not built for what was happening. By the end of the second day, what I watched across the world was exhaustion. Deep and comprehensive. The exhaustion of trying to hold everything together, of being strong for other people, of processing something enormous without the usual outlets. And in that exhaustion, there was a softening. People who had been very certain they did not need God were finding the certainty harder to maintain when they were this tired. And some of them in that tiredness let something through, let themselves ask the question they had been avoiding, let themselves consider that they might have been wrong about something important. And Jesus showed me that he was near to those people in those moments, near in a way that could be felt, that some of them would spend the night of the second day talking to God for the first time in years, for the first time ever, and that those conversations were heard. Third day is the part I go back to most often, even now, even months later. When the vision moved into the third day, the first thing I noticed was the sky. It was not right, not wrong in a threatening way, just not right in any way I had a category for. The color was somewhere between gray and deep purple. Not the beautiful purple of an evening sky, but something heavier and stranger, like the atmosphere itself was responding to something outside of it, like it was being pressed from the other side. The silence on the third day was the most complete thing I have ever experienced. Every sound that civilization makes, every engine and conversation and notification and piece of music, all of it was already gone by the third day. But even silence has a texture. The silence of an empty house is different from the silence of a forest. The silence of the third day was its own category entirely. It was not the silence of absence. It was the silence of presence, of something very large holding itself in place just before it moved. Jesus told me that on the third day, the distance between the physical world and the spiritual world would be at its thinnest point in a very long time. The people who had been walking closely with God would be able to feel this. Not with fear, with recognition. The way an animal senses a change in the air before a weather event, a knowing in the deepest part of them that something enormous and good was close. Inside the homes of believers on the third day, I watched the most beautiful thing in the entire vision. People who had nothing left in the visible world. No phone signal, very little food, no news, no contact with anything outside. And in the middle of that emptiness, praise. Not the performed kind, the kind that comes out of a person, because it is the truest thing they contain. The kind that costs something because it does. In a living room somewhere, there are maybe 10 people of different ages. One sitting against a wall with eyes closed and lips moving silently. One lying face down on the floor with arms stretched out. One standing with both hands raised toward the ceiling. None of them performing for each other. Each of them in their own space with God, and also together in a way that was more together than any ordinary gathering I had ever seen. The atmosphere in that room was so different from every other space I had been shown, and the vision that I felt something physical in me respond to it. A pull, something in me recognizing something in that room and wanting to move toward it. Jesus told me that moments exactly like that one were happening all over the world on that third day. Different languages, different rooms, different expressions, all of them pointing toward the same place. And he told me that every single one of those prayers was received, that nothing was overlooked, that nothing was lost. Not one word spoken to God in those hours went unheard. And I think about that often because from the outside, those people looked like the least powerful people in the world. Locked in their homes, no resources, no ability to act. And yet, in the reality of what was actually happening, they were the most significant people on earth in those hours. But Jesus showed me the other side of the third day too, in the places where faith had been absent or refused. The same spiritual closeness that the believers experienced as something beautiful was pressing on others as something crushing. The same nearness of the spiritual world that filled one room with peace was filling other rooms with a dread people could not name or explain. Something pressing down, something making the air feel wrong without any visible cause. Some people in those rooms were searching, desperately and sincerely. Bibles that had not been opened in years were being opened with shaking hands by people who did not know what they were looking for, only that they needed to find something. And Jesus told me he was meeting those people in those pages, that the door was still open, that anyone willing to walk through it could still do so even then. But there are also those who, when the pressure reached its highest point, chose to close further rather than open. Chose anger over surrender. Chose to harden the part of themselves that had been asking quiet questions for years rather than finally answer those questions honestly. And watching someone make that choice in real time was something I was not prepared for, because it was not the choice of someone monstrous. It was the choice of an ordinary frightened person who had been hurt and had built walls over a long time, and who even now could not bring themselves to let those walls come down. I felt something, watching it. Not judgment. Grief. Real grief. The kind that settles into your chest and does not leave quickly. And Jesus showed me that his love for those people had not changed, not in that moment. Not even as the doors closed from the inside. The grief coming from him as we watched together was not the grief of anger. It was the grief of love that has been refused. And there is nothing in the world I have ever encountered that comes close to describing what that felt like to be near. And then the fourth day came. I am going to try to describe the light, and I am going to fall short. And I am telling you that honestly before I begin. It did not begin like a sunrise. It began like a door opening in the sky, not metaphorically. Something in the upper atmosphere changed. Something on the other side of what human eyes can normally access pressed through into the visible world. And the light that came through was not light the way we have ever known light. It did not have a color I can name. It was bright, not in the way that hurts, but in the way that reveals. Like being in a dim room for a very long time, and someone finally opens every curtain at once, and you see for the first time all the things that were there all along, that had always been there, that the dimness had simply been hiding, and there was sound. It had the shape of a trumpet, but that description is not enough, and I knew it even as I reached for it. It resonated in places inside me that sound has never reached before or since. Not in my years. Deeper than that. In the center of whatever part of a person is most essentially and irreducibly them, and when it sounded, every person left on the earth stopped. Not by choice. Because there was simply no other possible response to it. It was the kind of sound that answered every question and ended every argument, and filled every emptiness all at once. And for one single breath of time between when that sound arrived and when everything that followed began, the whole world was still. And then people rose. I will tell you what I have been least able to let go of since that night in my hallway. It was the faces. I have spent 45 years looking at human faces in every possible circumstance. Joy and grief and fear and love and exhaustion and hope. I thought I had seen the full range of what a human face could hold. I had not. What was on the faces of those who rose was something I had no category for. It was the expression of someone arriving at the place they were always made for. Someone understanding in a single moment that every hard thing in their entire life, every confusion and loss and struggle in getting back up, had been leading with complete precision to exactly this, and that it was all worth it. Every single bit. Worth it. I cannot give that expression a name, but I carry it with me everywhere I go now. I carry it at the breakfast table in the morning, and on the drive to work, and in the quiet before I fall asleep. It is the reason I am writing this down. It is the reason I will keep telling this story for as long as I have voice to tell it. Before I was sent back, Jesus turned to me. He told me that what I had been shown was not given to me to hold privately, that the weight of it was not mine to carry alone. He told me that among the people who would eventually hear my words, there were some who were still deciding. Still in the spiritual equivalent of that third night. Still with the door open, and that my words, imperfect and limited as they were, might be part of what helped someone step through that door. And then I woke up. I was on the floor of my hallway, face against the cold floor, one arm underneath me, the bathroom light still on. I lay there for a long time before I moved. I was shaking, not from cold, from the weight of having been somewhere and having come back, because it had not been a dream. I have had dreams my whole life, and I know the difference. This was something I was in, something I was shown with a purpose attached to it. The difference between a dream and that experience is the difference between a photograph of a fire and actually standing next to one. I got up eventually, and I went to my kitchen, and I sat down at the table, and I did not turn on a light. I just sat in the dark for a long time, and I talked to God in a way I had never talked to him before. Not asking for anything, not performing anything, just talking, just present, the way you are present with someone you have just realized you have known your whole life without knowing that you knew them. I do not know exactly what is coming or when. I am an appliance repairman. I am not the man you would pick to carry something like this, and I suspect that is precisely the point. What I know is what I was shown. What I know is what those faces look like on the fourth day. And I know that I would rather say something imperfect and be doubted than say nothing and watch someone be unprepared. If what I've shared touched you, please, I beg you, don't just let this video end here. Share it with someone you know. Let this be shared across so that many will be ready for what may happen in the nearest future. This message is not to put fear in you, but to help you get ready. Visions and near-death testimonies are meant to warn of us, and not to put fear in us. So make sure you share this across. Thank you for listening. If you have been blessed, please kindly like video and subscribe to this channel for more testimonies like this coming your way. Stay safe and stay prepared. May the Lord God be your guide. Amen.